Donald Trump continues to implode on camera in the face of mounting backlash from stupid and divisive comments he made in the aftermath of a DC plane crash, which killed 67 people. Trump refused to take accountability and baselessly claimed that the crash was a result of DEI and diversity, President Biden and former Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg, even though the crash happened on his watch, and a preliminary FAA report indicates that the air traffic control tower was understaffed on Trump's watch. But before we unpack all that, if you end up liking this video and you want to support the channel, please be sure to hit the like, subscribe, and alert bells before you go. All right, friends, Donald Trump continuing to be Donald Trump continues. This is who he is, a pathological liar, a malignant narcissist who refuses to take accountability, even though that's periodically, or at least historically, what we expected of people in his position. So once again, Donald Trump was confronted by reporters about stupid comments he made in the aftermath of the DC plane crash. This was his response.
Okay.
Mr. President, to be clear, are you saying race or gender played a role in this tragedy?
It may have. I don't know. Incompetence might have played a role. We'll let you know that. But we want the most competent people. We don't care what race they are. We want the most competent people, especially in those positions. And you're talking about extremely complex things. And if they don't have a great brain, a great power of the brain, they're not going to be very good at what they do, and bad things will happen.
One might say the same thing about the presidency. If a president isn't very smart, isn't very psychologically stable, doesn't have a great brain, then bad things might happen. For example, 67 people might die in the first commercial jet crash in 15 or 16 years, and that happened on Trump's watch. But again, now he's like, well, I don't have any proof of that, but it might be incompetence. And clearly incompetence is a product of diversity, so says Trump, without any evidence. But wait, there's more.
Families of the victims of the plane crash.
I don't want to comment on that.
Do you have a plan to go visit the site or meet with any of the
I have a
first
plan
responders?
to visit, not the site, because you tell me, what's the site? The water?
Or to meet with the first responders down there?
I don't have a plan to do that, but I will be meeting with some people that were very badly hurt with their families.
So just to clarify, Donald Trump says he's not going to visit the site of the crash. What's interesting is when there was a train derailment in East Palestine, Ohio, Donald Trump threw a fit that President Biden didn't go, even though train derailments happen. But Biden suffered a political catastrophe, political consequences for his decision not to go, largely because Donald Trump made those consequences. He said, Biden needs to show up. And yet Trump says he's not going to go. He has no plans to visit the responders and the people on the ground, even though, again, this is the first commercial plane crash in 15 years. But wait, there's more. More challenge from reporters.
Mr. President, if 64 people lost their lives last night, if you aren't confident that DEI had any role, why bring it up?
Well, all I'm talking about is competence, and we want in that particular position, we have to have the most competent people in our country because we're talking about lives. Now, it may or may not have had to do, but I don't like the fact that the helicopter was at the exact same level as the airplane. The helicopter should have been 1,000 feet or 500 feet above it or something below it. The plane was at 300 to 400 feet, or the plane should have been stopped because the helicopter could have stopped. The plane can't be stopped, but the plane was on a schedule that was, it was along a track.
But again, what the hell does that have to do with diversity and DEI? Maybe what you're saying is true. Maybe that there was, some sort of, again, human error. But why the hell would you arbitrarily assume it had anything to do with DEI when there's no evidence to corroborate it? But this is what he does. He just says stupid shit reflexively. Not a good quality to have in a president. Here's another clip.
Talking about that, but air traffic controllers, maybe in particular, they have to be brilliant with computers, brilliant with graphics. They have to be psychologically really, really smart. And, there are a lot of people that wouldn't be able to do that.
But again, what does that have to do with DEI? Are you suggesting that a member of a minority group isn't psychologically smart, can't do anything? What are you talking about? But we have more clips, unfortunately, from this as it goes on, literally as we speak.
Was there a shortage of staff at the control tower at DCA last night? You're aware of?
Well, that's part of competence right there. They shouldn't have that happen. Right there is what I'm talking about. Competence would be you're not going to have a shortage, but if you had the right people, you wouldn't need as many people either.
Do you know if
So Trump is suggesting if you have an army of superhuman air traffic controllers, you don't need to be fully staffed. And then he says, well, being short-staffed is a sign of competence or an incompetence, but that's happening on your watch. So does that chain of causality go to you? Are you incompetent because your FAA isn't properly staffed? And might it have anything to do with your federal funding freeze and your purge of a recent air safety board and, your bullying of the FAA administrator into early retirement, as this clip addresses?
Explained the first, but really more importantly, explain the second, and we'll start signing. Go ahead, please.
Yes, sir. Just 2 items for your signature today. The first is the formal commission appointing Chris Rochelot to be the Deputy Administrator of the Federal Aviation Administration.
Right.
And since the commissioner position since the administrator position is currently vacant, he will act as the administrator since he's now been appointed deputy.
And he's a very capable guy.
So that right there is Trump signing the executive order to install a de facto acting FAA administrator. Well, maybe you should have done that a few days ago, dumbass. Maybe you shouldn't have bullied the former FAA administrator out of his job. But you see how slow, how lethargic, how totally out of touch this is? Only now you're interested in having an FAA administrator? Here's another clip.
Sir.
Thank you.
Second, for your signature, we have a presidential memorandum titled Immediate Assessment of Aviation Safety. In light of the damage done to aviation safety by the Biden administration's DEI and woke policies, what this presidential memorandum orders is for your Secretary of Transportation and FAA administrator, in this case, acting FAA administrator, to basically ensure that we are actively undoing all of that damage, that we are assessing how much damage was done, and that we're ensuring that people hired within the FAA, in keeping with your memorandum of January 21st, are only the most outstanding, capable people for the jobs that they're being hired into.
In other words, competence.
Yes, sir.
So again, when asked, do you have any evidence that this was a product of DEI or diversity? No. But then you just signed this sort of weird executive order blaming the Biden administration and saying that actually it was their DEI programs which caused this to happen. You have no evidence, but you're signing an executive order asserting it as fact. Do you see? You guys see what I'm talking about? Like, this is just, it's where it's a nexus of stupidity and contradiction and absolute lack of seriousness. They just don't care. They don't care. This is where we are with this. Let's see. Let's see if there's anything else. How about this one? How about, okay, well, in light of all this, in light of the staffing issues, maybe you want to pull back on your employee buyout. That suggestion that people should leave the federal government, including at the FAA, because you want to purge the federal government and either shutter the positions or replace them with loyalists. Maybe you want to rescind that buyout offer.
Federal workers the option to resign immediately. There are 50,000 FAA employees. Does this tragedy give you reason to reconsider that option of resignations because of concerns about staffing issues on airline safety?
If people aren't coming to work, if they're not going to come into the office and report as per the date that you know what it is, everybody knows what the date is, it's been very well documented, then they're going to be terminated.
So again, no interest in revisiting that particular order whatsoever. I'm stunned. There's some other clips here as well. I'm trying to sort through if there are any that address this. Here's one more. We'll play one more from Donald Trump trying to baselessly blame this tragedy, which claimed the lives of 67 people, on DEI and diversity and the Biden administration.
64 people lost their lives.
We already saw that clip, so we'll skip that one. Okay, so this is just where we are. He's just saying things without evidence. I mentioned earlier, and Trump was asked about this, that there is a preliminary FAA report that says the staffing at the air traffic control tower was not normal. This was according to the New York Times breaking report. Staffing was not normal at Airport Tower, according to preliminary FAA report. Staffing at the air traffic control tower at Ronald Reagan National Airport was, quote, not normal for the time of day and volume of traffic, according to an internal preliminary Federal Aviation Administration safety report about the collision that was reviewed by the New York Times. The controller who was handling helicopters in the airport's vicinity Wednesday night was also instructing planes that were landing and departing from its runways. Those typically are assigned to 2 controllers rather than 1. So again, going back to a clip that Trump said earlier, if you have really good people, you don't need numbers. But these jobs are designed for multiple people. And this is what happens when you have one person multitasking 2 incredibly important jobs. But the last thing I want to show you isn't Donald Trump. It's actually Democratic Senator Chris Murphy. And he's been leading he's certainly one of the foremost Democrats, Democratic elected officials at this point, bringing the rhetoric, bringing the fire to this Trump administration. And this is a video he dropped about this tragedy.
I just watched some of Donald Trump's press conference about the tragedy last night, and it was disgusting. It was disgusting. First of all, our hearts go out to the victims' families, to the first responders. This is awful. But what is also awful is to watch the President of the United States stand up at the White House and claim that it is women or black people or Latinos working at the FAA that caused this crash. This idea that by hiring non-white men, you are putting the nation's safety in jeopardy, or that non-white men caused this crash, is unconscionable. We need to get to the bottom of what happened. Nobody's going to know today what caused that crash. But what we absolutely know is that it is not women working at the FAA that caused that crash. What we definitely know is it is not black employees at the FAA that caused that crash. There are some true things. President Trump forced out of office the administrator of the FAA. He's been waging a regular assault on public employees since he came into office. He forced the entire Aviation Security Review Board, Advisory Board, to step down. We don't know whether those things had anything to do with this crash, but we should take the time to get to the facts. And everybody in this country should be outraged that Donald Trump is standing up on that podium lying to you, deliberately lying to you about what the cause was, and further using the White House as a means to try to divide us from each other. That performance was disgraceful, and every single senator and member of Congress should call him out for how disgraceful it was.
Sadly, they won't. As a matter of fact, I wish more Democrats would do it, but they have been particularly slow. Yeah, this is where we are. Everything he said was true. There should be an investigation, but this happened on Trump's watch. AOC put it best. This is how she phrased it, and we'll end with this. I represent LaGuardia Airport as well as workers for JFK. Trump gutted the Aviation Safety Committee last week. Air traffic controllers, already understaffed, got Trump's buyout this week with a 1-week ultimatum to decide. It's not DEI, it's him, and Elon too. So there you go. As far as I'm concerned, turnabout's fair play. What's good for the goose is good for the gander. And we should have one standard. And the standard for MAGA was anything bad that happens on the Democrats' watch is the Democrats' fault. They're to blame morally, and they should pay a price politically. That's the standard that MAGA set. Well, by definition, this happened on Trump's watch, which means that he should also be blamed and politically should suffer consequences as well. So I think Democrats are right to point this out and with one voice loudly say, this happened on your watch, Donald. You're the president of the United States. You're ultimately responsible, and make him pay a political consequence. In the meantime, let me know what you think in the comments.